All right, so already we've seen several reports and objections raised by some governors. In fact, just this morning we're reading where Gombe, the Commissioner for Finance, was just saying, look, Lagos, Rivers, or Southern states, he says, need to reconsider because of the impact this will have on some of the other states. In fact, some of the words he used was put sentiment aside and be brotherly. But in terms of the implications of this, what does this mean? How will this play out? What do you see happening? We've got Bukar Kyari, who is a former chairman of the Nigeria Economic Summit Group, who joins us this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. This will have huge implications if it were to be upheld by the Supreme Court as it stands today. So from your perspective, I mean, I know that NESG has several papers and documents about what to do to revamp the economy. What do you see playing out should this be upheld?
Good morning, Chamberlain. This is basically my personal observation and points of view. I think NESG had always been at the forefront of recommending policies that would enhance and grow the economy. But this is something that I believe can be touched from the point of view of how is the impact of the actions of at least Rivers and to a lesser extent Lagos State would affect the overall economy. First of all, VAT collections, constitutionally speaking, I do not have the professional constitutional knowledge. Therefore, I will leave that to the lawyers to adjudicate. The matter has gone to courts. What I can say, though, is that if the VAT generated in each state were to be collected by the states rather than a federal law that I believe, is where the federal government is using to take the matter to court, then there would be many repercussions. First of all, what would happen to every goods that are imported into the country? And if they are imported into the country from, say, a Papa port, would I then say, as Lagos State, that value is being added by virtue of it being lifted from a port that is in my jurisdiction, or is it only for products and services that are created within the Lagos environment? So there are many elements that need to be looked at. But the implications for states is that states that have a lot of economic activity, and here I would probably put Lagos, Rivers, maybe to a lesser extent Oyo, maybe Ogun, which is a neighboring state, Kano, possibly Kaduna, may have an upper hand vis-a-vis the other states. But that's actually the bane of a republic. If we are going to be a republican democracy, then the federating units have to fend for themselves. Now, the idea of going to Abuja to collect monthly allocations may actually begin to decrease, if you will, because if you are having a larger portion of your revenues as a state from IGR, for example, Lagos again is a case in point, and to a lesser extent even Rivers, then you begin to assert what you claim or what you believe is your rights. Now, that would then be tested up to the Supreme Court. And of course, the impact then would be state governors need to wake up to the reality that, it's not the old the old method of coming to Abuja every month to collect subventions or allocations.
All right, we'll go to break now, but we'll be back and take a look at some more perspective in terms of what other scenarios could possibly play out in just a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, let me be a little hypothetical. Now, if in the event that perhaps the judgment doesn't go in the way of Rivers, perhaps at the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeal, do you think that this would have sufficiently raised that consciousness and brought back that debate saying, look, the country needs to have another conversation about revenue allocation and resource management in different states?
Indeed, yes. If this were to, let's say, fail in the Supreme Court, and we go back to the original stance, then what will happen is that the conversation will continue. I know that there is also a lot of discussions about changes that people would want to see in the Constitution itself. Because if we are to be a republic or Republican democracy, then what would happen is that the federating units, in this case the states, may have to determine their fate, so to speak. But the other larger issue is actually what people say, either called revenue allocation or formula or whatever. But the key aspect of this discussion is that things are not going to remain the same. Things may change. And some people, including myself, believe that we just have too many states that may not necessarily be that viable. Either we can collapse them into those 6 geopolitical zones, into regions, and thereby reducing the cost of governance and make governance more efficient and efficacious to the average Nigerian. The second would be that if the expenses were curtailed, rather than having 6 or 7 state governments with so much overhead, you now have 1 instead. Then, and you also now have economic viability, whereby internally the administrations of those 6 geopolitical states or regions or zones could be independent of the center. And the other element is that if some of the lists move from federal level to the states and local government levels, then what you would have is that there would not be justification for the federation to be getting, is it 43% or 45% of the federal allocation? In which case there would be more money that would actually go accrue to the lower units. In fact, I would like to see more going to local governments than even to states. And thereby what will happen is that at that local level, which is much closer to the average citizen, there would be effectiveness in execution of capital projects, true capital projects, not buying cars and calling it capital. So essentially, that would also have an effect on the democratic process. People are voting for the people they want to see enhance their livelihoods. I don't believe that is the case today, because politicians come in during elections, make all kinds of promises, and then they disappear into this powerful beings that become untouchables, so to speak, using an analogy of India, right? And the problem is that once you become so powerful and you have the absolute power, you would begin to do things that have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the lives of the average people. And I see this as a conversation that hopefully will go all the way to those levels of discourse, rather than just the superficiality of whether it is Weke or whether it is Lagos that is making a claim. I think the conversation should be much broader and much deeper than what we have, what has been started. So I hope that we, as a nation, would realize that there is a much more deeper conversation around internally generated revenues at the lower levels, and also the allocation formula at federal and the federating units.
Okay, so let's try as much as we can to deepen our own conversation this morning. I mean, even beyond what we're discussing now. Still related, definitely. Earlier on, you said some states are not viable, really. And it begs the question, how can a state not be viable? I mean, what does that mean? I hear that a lot, that states are not viable. From time to time, I have this compendium of states and the natural resources they have. I mean, their strengths and the rest, some agriculture, some mineral resources, some, I mean, the list goes on and on, some tourism. So how can a state not be viable, really? Is it that the government is choosing not to make it viable, or, please, if you could explain.
Well, it's a combination of things. Number one, if natural resources were actually the key ingredient for viability, Nigeria would have been an extremely viable country. By that I mean Nigerians would not be mired in poverty as we are right now. Oil was discovered since the 50s, and what has that given us? I'm now talking from the point of view of the average citizen. When you are selling anything crude, whether it is gold or silver, cocoa, coffee, tea, whatever it is, if you just pick it from the ground or pick it from a tree and go sell it, and then you go and import the refined products, you're never going to be viable. So essentially what that means is that there has to be, the quality of leadership has to change. The leaders must actually look at how they can attract investments into their states or their regions or zones in such a manner that whatever is being produced in the state is, some value addition need to take place, 1, 2, or 3 steps of value addition. For example, I just recently saw coffee, not coffee, Nigerian coffee in one store, but the other element is that chocolate is now being produced within the West Africa region and being sold. Now, if we continue on that trajectory, and that has nothing to do with governments, by the way, but if the governments create the necessary enabling environment and put the first potential investment, so to speak, they create that enabling environment, they make it so that the viability of those industries or businesses becomes strong, then any state, even if they don't have water to drink, may become viable. Viability of a sub-region or of a state depends on how creative and innovative the state actors are. Today, unfortunately, we do not have such leadership at the lower levels. We may have 1 or 2, but I don't believe that the 36 plus FCT are in that category, so to speak.
It's viable to the extent to which the leadership in the state wants it to be viable or is actively making it viable. I think that's quite instructive from what you have said. But on a final note now, so the conversation has been around the federal government will not get the 15% they used to get anymore, so states essentially own everything. Do you think for old time's sakes, if I could use that term, states should still remit something to the federal government if this, of course, goes through?
I think if the structure is properly done, the states or the zones need to be sending some things out, because we're copying a model. And if we're going to copy a model, we also need to customize it to our local needs. What I believe strongly is that at the center, they now have no need for certain things, but there are fundamental items that belong in the center. Defense, for example, external affairs, for example, and some key aspects of even the national economy, meaning the central banks and all of that. I wouldn't want to see state central banks, so to speak, where currencies are issued at the state level. I don't believe that that is even feasible in this country. There would be rampant economic malfeasance all over the place. But at the you know, just as you have stated, there will be some level of, you know, for example, certain states might have surplus and they may end up being the contributor to the general pool, so to speak. I mean, if we are to copy the US model, for example, New York every year contributes more than takes from the federal. And then you go to a southern state in the US, and they may tend to be actually net getting more from the federation than they send out. Some of the oil states like Alaska or similar states that produce oil in the US or natural resources, they tend to be the ones that are net surplus providers rather than takers. So essentially it is to balance the living standards. Even though if you go from state to state, the quality of life differs, but on average, they're basically similar. And if you want to achieve that, then fine. If not, what you would find is that within the country, you will find a lot of economic migrants moving from, say, a poor state, quote unquote, moving to seek opportunities in a richer state. And that may also dislocate public services in those states that we call successful in the short term.
Well,
so
who
at
knows
the end of
if,
the day,
yeah.
Yeah,
Who knows if this will eventually perhaps affect the way we conduct our elections. Maybe if a state is struggling, you could then say, well, look, we need people who are strong in economics to come up and fix the state and run the state. So states that were hitherto thought to be not viable, if someone is driving, piloting the affairs, you never can tell. So it's a going concern. So we'll keep our tabs on this one. And it certainly is an interesting one. We'll have to thank you very much indeed, Bukar Kyari, former chairman, NESG, for your perspective today.